John 1:1. In the beginning was God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And the further verses say that the Word became flesh. That the God became flesh. It didn't say God became in flesh.
Question number 1. Even when he submitted to the Father, walked on the face of the earth in human form, said, "My Father is greater than me," and all sorts of other similar statements, did Jesus say anything else?
So my question is, as you asked you who you were to figure out as to why you believe in Christianity, as in the Trinity is the most pertinent thing to me. Why do you?
Why is the Trinity most pertinent?
Because for me, as a Muslim, the difference between you and I is I say that there's only one God with no divisions. You say there's one God in three persons.
But
this is why answering your question, this is important for me.
Yeah. Can I please suggest to you, where we differ is not in the conception of God to begin with. I think where we differ is in an even more fundamental point, which is Jesus' death, burial, resurrection.
This is another one, yes.
No. That is the beginning point. Once you know that he died, was buried, and came back alive, you would know that you better listen to him, whatever he says.
So using the same logic, anyone who came back to life, we must listen to them.
Yes, if anyone came back to life...
So the person that Jesus raised back from life, Lazarus, we must listen to him.
Yes.
No, this logic doesn't work. See the Muslims... I'll give you the answer.
Why? No, wait a second.
I'm giving you the answer. Why
I didn't ask you a question. But the point is... So, Jesus died, buried, came back alive of his own accord. There is no one else in human history like that.
Of his own accord, he brought himself back. So he was out of existence and he brought himself back into existence.
He entered into the realm called death and came back.
Okay, so he was alive throughout the period.
He went into the realm called death and came back.
So he was not alive, this is what I'm saying.
Depending on... I put it very clearly. He entered into the realm called death and he came back.
My point is...
I'm not being shy. I put it very clearly. To stick to the point, he entered into death and came back.
Okay, so you believe that Jesus as God died. He entered into the realm of death. It means that he died. But then how do you reconcile as a Christian? Even though this isn't a topic I actually wanted to talk about, I wanted to talk about monotheism. Because this for me is more pertinent. I believe a man can die and come back alive, and it doesn't mean he is God. We've seen this before.
But the question is...
Let me make the point. The same way that I observed you. Just so we can have fluidity in the discussion. So Jesus, he said, for as Jonah was in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the Son of Man be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. Do you believe that, for example, Jonah, he was dead in the belly of the beast for 3 days and 3 nights? It's not a true question. If you don't want to continue, okay, let's change the topic, no problem. Okay, Jesus said...
We're not changing the topic. The point is simple. Did Jesus die historically?
Oh, okay.
Did he die historically? Was he buried historically? And did he came back alive historically?
Okay, history doesn't deal with resurrection. This is a theological point of view.
History deals with the
You ask me a
resurrection.
question, I'll answer. Is this the way it works, right?
No, it was a rhetorical thing, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, go on. No, you go on. Let me finish this and then you can go on, yeah. Death, burial, resurrection. Are those three things? Did Jesus die? Was Jesus buried? Did he came back alive? Historically. That's what we're talking about. Once we have agreement on that, Trinity and whatever else, we can. Those are master's degree and so on.
No. I believe for me, and I've mentioned this, you can disagree, you've had your time to talk, I'm just going to say my point. I believe monotheism is the most important aspect out of all of this. I believe a man can live, he can die, he can be resurrected. I believe that. I believe a man can come back later, like as in Elisha was taken up into the heavens, he come back. I don't mind any of those. I don't believe that makes a person God. When Lazarus died and he was brought back to life, it didn't make him any God. You know, he conquered death through Jesus, but nonetheless he conquered death. It doesn't make him God-like. So for me, the most pertinent question, this is my opinion, you don't have to agree with me and so on, but is that God, as taught by the legacy and the oceans of prophets, is that He is only one. And I believe this legacy was continued by Moses, Abraham, Ismail, Isaac, and Jesus, the disciples, even Paul, the Gospels, and the early Christians, including Mary. She was part of the 120 of the Jerusalem church, the early Christians, and they believed in only one God. They believed that Jesus was a man. So my point here was, for example, you look at John 17 verse 3. It is eternal life that you know Him, the only true God, and the one true God has sent, Jesus Christ. Now if it's saying there's only one true God, and the conjunction and Jesus, meaning that Jesus is not part of that one true God, we say as Muslims that He worshipped only one God. A question I asked you, what's your good name? Aro? Aro. If you had honestly, and this is a question, you can say whatever you wish, there's no compulsion here. If you had seen, any one of you, Jesus worshipping God as He moved away from His companions in Gethsemane, and then He put His head to the ground and He worshipped only one God. If you saw that incident, would you worship Him, Jesus, or would you worship with Him to the one God that He worshipped?
It depends. It depends.
On what?
Depends on various other things.
So if Jesus was here worshipping one God, what's your answer? You would worship Him.
So Hamza, can we please agree on this? Yeah. When you say Jesus in multiple ways, and I'm sure you can bring out various points. Hashim does that, you do that, various other people do that. That Jesus declares His submission to the Father. If you're going to mention those points, we are all with you on those points. As a matter of fact, that is primary Christian doctrine. Jesus submitted Himself to the Father. Primary Christian doctrine. If Jesus did not submit, if Jesus did not surrender, what He did on the cross is not a demonstration of love. Because Jesus submitted, because Jesus surrendered, we Christians say He needn't have done that, except He did that, and therefore I can say, God, you love me. So submission to the Father when Jesus walked on the face of the earth is primary Christian doctrine. Muslims repeating that over and over again as if it is anti-Christian is not going to help you. It is primary Christian, I agree. Yeah. The only question I'd ask you is this.
Before we go to the next topic, can I just have a rejoinder?
Let me just finish that.
But don't make the discussion too wide so we lose the topic. Let's come back to this topic.
Couple of more points.
No, let's deal with one at a time. So we don't.
Couple of more statements. Couple of more statements to that point. So, did Jesus submit to the Father? Yes, He did. The points that you raise are not Muslim points, they are Christian points. They are straight out of the Bible. They are Christian points.
Good.
And we agree. All of the things in the Bible, we agree. So Christian points, you're making a Christian case, you're for us there, not against us. So the only thing I recommend you to do is to ask yourself a few questions. Question number one, even when He submitted to the Father, walked on the face of the earth in human form, said, my Father is greater than me, and all sorts of other similar statements, did Jesus say anything else to indicate that He rightly had a greater position and that He was willingly surrendering His greater position? That's question number one. Did Jesus indicate?
You made a point and then you've asked a question. You made a number of points and now you've asked one. And
Let me finish this.
1 second, but you're going to make it too much for me to answer.
I can remind you and you can answer. You can take all your time and answer. Question number one, did Jesus suggest in any manner, shape or form that He had rightfully a much greater position which He was willingly sacrificing on? Question number one. Question number two, did Jesus make any points to suggest that prior to taking up human form, He was of a different nature, much higher? And question number three, did He suggest after taking up human form, after finishing up the task which was set before him, he was again going to take up a much superior nature. Those are the three questions we need to address.
Okay, great. So hold on to those three questions. I'm going to answer them one by one. I'll ask you to repeat the question, so it's not gish galloping that you're throwing everything on the table. It's impossible for me to retain all the information and answer. So what I'll do, I'll answer the first bit, then I'm going to answer the three questions which you said, and you're not going to bring in another topic, so we can keep on to the actual topic. The first one where you say that Jesus is subordinate to God.
Willingly.
This is willingly or unwillingly. He says, be it thy will, not my will. So it's not willingly. So Jesus submitted unto God in the Garden of Gethsemane unwillingly, if we're actually looking at the scriptures. 1 second, I said I'll answer everything.
No, let him.
So
finish.
in regards to Jesus' subordination to the Father, this is not Trinity belief. This is actually Arian belief, and this is what happened in the Council of Nicaea, the Arian controversy. One can just Google this. This is a heresy in Christianity.
Can we just stick to the Bible, please? Can I please
I
recommend?
did not stop you.
Can I know you didn't. Can I please
Look, this is not
recommend
going to
you?
make any good discussion.
Can I please recommend you just stick to the Bible?
You have to. I can recommend you. Okay, you've made your recommendation. Thank you.
Just Bible.
You've made the recommendation.
Otherwise,
now,
we'll be talking about all
yes,
sorts of other things.
And now I can also restrict you, but I'm not going to.
Just about the Bible.
I allowed you to speak. Yeah. So the Arian controversy is to suggest that Jesus was subordinate to God the Father. Now this is a heresy in Christianity, because the Trinity actual orthodox belief is that the three are co-equal, co-eternal and co-existent. What you produce sounds great, but it's not actually a Christian Trinitarian doctrine. Now the first question you asked, what was the first question?
The first question I asked was, did Jesus, even when he was on the face of the earth, suggest, after having made the point that the Father was greater than him and so on, did he make any other point to suggest he had a rightful place much above that, but he was willing, willingly giving up on those, let's say, rightful things that he could hold on to?
Okay, first and foremost, we don't say he was willing. He was submitted to God's will, as you mentioned before. This is the first thing. So when we look at what the prophets before him, or sorry, God in the Old Testament, he said, your God, the Lord, is one. Now Jesus, if we look at the beliefs even of the prophets, they also believe in one God. We look at the beliefs of Jesus. 2 times the people came to him and they made accusations that he equates himself to being God, because he says he is the Son of God. He said, did I not say ye are gods? So this language has to be understood in the context that is said. When God came down to Jacob, this wasn't God. This was an angel, a representative. So we know in biblical language, when it says that a person is God, it means he is a representative of God. Just as the angel in the first 5 books of Moses came down and wrestled with Jacob, and then Jacob's name was changed to Israel, because you have fought with God and you have won. If we don't say that this is an angel, it means the Almighty God lost in a wrestling match to Jacob. But we know this isn't the interpretation that any scholar he holds on to. So Jesus, he was asked on 2 occasions, if you were God. Both occasions he said no. The disciples were asked by Jesus, who do you say I am? And who do you say the Son of God is? On both occasions, they said Elijah, Jeremiah, the prophets. No one had said God or part of God or third of God or any of those claims. If you look at the early church as well, Peter was one of the founders, along with James, the brother of Jesus. They set up the early church, which is called, as Paul refers to them as the circumcision group. One can Google that and you can check that out yourself. These 120 did not believe, if you read Peter as well, that Jesus was God. They don't believe this. Neither did James nor Paul. Jesus says, it's, like I say, it's eternal life, that you are one true God, and Jesus is the one whom you have sent. Jesus said the slave is never greater than the master, nor is the one who is sent greater than the one who has sent him. He says, my Father is greater than all, as the verse you mentioned, and he says, my Father is greater than I. So this is a subordinate kind of belief, which is actually heretical in modern Trinitarian concept. What was the second question you asked?
So you've not actually answered the question, by the way. You've not answered the question.
You haven't answered.
What did Jesus say?
The question was, I appreciate that there are plenty of statements which are there in the New Testament some of which are from Jesus' own mouth to suggest that Jesus was willingly submitting to the Father. But the question truly is, you've given more examples for that.
Sure,
The question truly is, on top of that, did Jesus say anything to suggest that he had an even greater nature, even when he was on the face of the earth, but was willingly not using that?
Okay, this is why I
That's what you
answered.
didn't
This
answer.
no, I did actually. But I'm not
No,
sure.
no,
Okay. You mentioned that. Do you remember? I recall when Jesus said, "Did I not
Address
say?"
it now.
Yes,
Address it.
that's
Go on,
what.
address it.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Did I not say ye are gods? The language has to be understood. There were verses where Jesus, for example, it says in John.
So
you have to-
when you
about
say ye are
himself.
gods, what did Jesus say? How did Jesus finish up? What did he
Jesus
say
the
about
one who said-
himself?
One second. Remember, you can't keep asking questions on top of a question. You've already got.
No, I need to
ask me
comment on
3
that.
questions. Yeah, that's fine. But I needed to rejoin it before.
What
but
did
you-
Jesus say there?
Listen, Adewale, you said that I should have a rejoinder. You give me ample time. I've only answered one.
No, you
I'm still trying to
haven't.
answer.
You haven't
If I have, but you said you didn't follow, so I'm going to repeat it again.
So one second.
if you let me-
Well,
listen,
yeah,
Adewale,
I'm
you
going to.
really
I'm
have
going to let you.
No.
I'm going to
have
let you.
otherwise
Just
the
a doubt.
conversation is not going to be.
Just a
no,
doubt.
I didn't disturb you, Adewale.
I know,
I didn't.
I know, just a
so
doubt.
Jesus, there are verses which show a divinity. There are verses, I don't doubt that. But like I mentioned with Jacob, when God came down and when the angel came down, they referred to that angel as, what did I say? As God. Meaning any person who is a representative of God is called God. That's why when I said Jesus was accused of making himself equivalent to God, he says, did I not say ye are gods? So yes, I mentioned
He didn't
twice.
stop there, though.
Listen, please.
He didn't
you
stop
have
there,
to
though.
allow me to speak. You said I didn't answer the questions. I said 2 times Jesus was accused. These are the indications that Jesus did have divinity according to some people, but he rebuted those 2 occasions when he was called or made or accused to be equivalent to God. So the question, secondly.
No, when am I going to? When am I going
I
to?
said, yeah, you could do that afterwards. You made a big statement and then you said 3 questions.
Yeah,
And I said,
I can
and
remind you.
agreed.
I can
Adewale.
remind you of the second and the third question in a bit. But prior to that, can I deal with a couple of points you
You
raised?
can in your time. This is otherwise we're going to go into a digression, which equals to another digression, and we lose the points.
So
This is
now-
why I say don't ask more questions. Listen, one second. This is why I suggested in the beginning stick to one topic. Do you see the benefit
We
of
just
that?
want to
one
respond
topic,
to your
yeah,
point.
one
We just want
topic.
to respond to
Just
it.
ye
I
are.
know, but I want to respond also.
So
but
what
then
you
we
said-
never
Quest-
go to the second question.
No, but what you said is quite a lot of information.
I know, and he
we want
said
to
not,
respond to it.
and that's I wasn't able to respond. So I'm saying
I can. If your
Adewale,
problem is,
Adewale. Okay, look.
we might not finish the other 2 questions.
Yes.
Don't worry about that. I know exactly the questions I raised. I can remind you that. No
Adewale,
problem.
I made it quite clear in the beginning. Let's deal with one at a time.
This is one broad
We're on
topic.
question 1.
Yeah,
We're on
one
question
topic.
1.
Yeah.
No, but now you're not allowing. You asked 3 questions and made 1 point.
You wanna
I
So,
addressed
Can
one
I?
point.
Can
One
I?
sec- one sec-
So
please, you
okay.
have to-
In a
you
simple
really
way,
have to-
can I please suggest
really
you
have to
haven't
allow-
answered my first question? So let's finish it off
No,
there,
no.
and I can come back to that later.
Okay.
If that's all right.
Did
yeah.
you hear my rejoinder? I
Yeah,
just made
your point isn't satisfactory.
Okay, then I'm not here to convince you. The audience is here. Hear me, Adewale.
Where?
Adewale, look,
What?
there's an online audience.
Yeah. So
Adewale,
in
look,
other
look,
words, you're
look.
trying to speak to me now.
Adewale, listen.
Not your
listen,
camera.
listen. Do you think that you will be able to convince me and I will be able to convince you?
No, the point
No,
isn't
no,
about
James,
convincing.
Adewale,
The
please,
point
please.
is having a reasonable conversation.
That's what I'm saying, but we need to know when we have to draw the line, and I know you want to accept what I will say to you, and you know I want you.
So
want
can
to
I
accept-
please just say you haven't answered my first
And
question
can you
and
explain
move
why?
on?
Can you
One
explain
second.
why?
And move on.
Yeah, sure.
That's fine.
I gave the answer quite clearly when Jesus was accused of being God.
I don't know how much of the Bible you know. You haven't answered my first question.
Arveli, do you agree that you're not allowing me to speak?
Now
Without
I am.
interruption.
Now I am.
Okay. So your question was, where in other verses in the Bible was Jesus showing indication that he was divine or godly or something? I made quite clear, the camera's there, that there are places when they accused him, Jesus, on 2 occasions that he was making himself equal to God. Do you understand? That you follow through. Another place I explained, when a man represents God, he is called God. yeah, to show you that this argument often it does not work.
So in other
I
words,
answer
you are
Arveli,
concluding.
please, Arveli. So I answered your question. I leave it for the audience.
I'm going to suggest to you, you've taken up a couple of examples which you are tweaking to your own convenience.
You know
and
what?
think
The
you're
conversation is not going to work unless you respect the time. You
So
spoke
what's the
and
time?
noticed.
Let's go back to the time. What
You,
time
you
are we
noticed you
talking?
spoke and you said one thing and 3 questions and you promised and it's on camera.
Which I still am saying.
that you will allow me.
Which I
to
still
answer.
am saying. Let's deal with all the 3 questions.
If you're a man who is true to your word, I'm happy for you to answer me the questions.
So when,
first.
just
So
a
the
simple
second
doubt.
question.
When do I get to respond back to your
After I
current
answer
question?
these
Oh, yeah,
questions.
okay, that's fine. So your
Do you
point.
agree with it? Do you agree with that? This
Well, if
format.
that, I don't think that's a good format, but
didn't make
if
that
that's fine.
agreement on
Okay,
The
do
3
you-
questions
do you
I remember.
what I initially stated to you.
I would say it's better
No,
for
one
him.
second,
Can I
one
just say this? It's better for
Let me-
him
let me
to
just ask
respond
the
to
question.
your question on number 1.
Hamza,
But this is
it's
what I
simple.
said.
Hamza,
Rather
Hamza.
than go into
As far as I am
Ray.
Great. I originally suggested that. Arweli said no and he continued and he promised.
Hamza, my only
Arweli,
point is this.
Arweli,
My
one
only
second.
point is
Arweli,
this.
You're not listening at all.
I listen to you. My only point is this.
Conversation, Arweli,
In
it
compare
cannot go on if you do not respect times and rules.
Stop taking the moral
the
high
times
ground.
and rules
No,
which we
I-
never
I
spoke
had
about.
said
Humble
already.
yourself,
We
man.
never spoke
Okay,
about
would
any
you like
time
to
and
talk
rules.
about one thing at
Humble
a time?
yourself, man. Come on.
One thing at a time. Yeah. Shall we
I don't
talk
mean to be
about
rude.
the
I've
one?
not been rude to you.
Please just
No, that's fine. The problem, Hamza, is that we never started off with
Okay.
rules and times, and
No,
so we
I
didn't start
I
off in
did.
that way.
I said, should we
What
not?
time of
I
it?
said, would it not be reasonable that I answer your one question first? This is what I said.
Yeah.
You said no. I'll remind you of the 3 questions.
Precisely, which I'm still
And
sticking
now-
with.
no,
I can remind you, those 3 questions I raised are crystal clear in my mind.
Okay.
I can remind you even after 10 minutes.
Okay.
But the
So-
points you have raised are not in my memory. I'm trying to take notes as quick as
But this is
possible.
what I said to you, and you rejected that.
But I can remind you the 3 questions. Can you
think-
remind me all
We
the
want
points you
proper
raised?
dialogue here. We want proper dialogue.
Oh, okay,
This
no
is what I
problem.
said in the
Hamza, no problem.
Okay, no problem. Let's do it your
Let's-
way. Let's do it your way. Let's do it. But let's keep to one-on-one because the reason is.
I tell you the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying. If you've made a clear mistake in your representation of Scripture, would you not want us to qualify that?
Of course. But
Well,
this
give
is
us a
where I
chance,
said-
give us a
So-
Listen, Ray.
so-
Sorry, he asked me a question.
Go
Whenever
on,
a
go on.
question
Sorry.
is asked,
Hamza, go on.
you
Sorry.
have to-
I
you
do
see,
apologize. We
If you
just
ask
don't
me a
have.
question, do you at least say, can we agree on the principle? If a question is asked, that I have the courtesy to allow me to answer it.
And we believe
Absolutely,
we have.
Okay,
We
you asked me this question.
And I believe
Now,
The
one of
first,
the,
yeah.
I think you should time this, you know.
now the
I think you
initial
should time it.
question was,
Yeah.
that you, this is the initial statement that you asked the 3 questions. Okay, no problem. You decided to rescind on that, no problem. Now,
Decided to what?
rescind on that.
Yeah.
No problem.
No, I'm not descending on that. I'm just saying I have that in my memory. I can remind you even after 10 minutes. But the points you raised, I'm not sure how long
It's
it'll
now
be in my
becoming
memory.
a debate about debating.
That's a good
Okay,
point.
so now, okay, going back to the first point that I rebutted on your point, I'll let you continue with that.
Good, thank you. So, thank you very much. That's very gracious of you. Yeah, thank
That's
you very much.
nice.
Hamza.
That's what I like to see.
So
yeah.
I asked the question I really asked you was, even while on the face of the earth, did Jesus mention anything to an extent he was much greater than what he was using for himself? Was the question. And I can give you multiple examples, crystal clear. The one greater than the temple is here. The Son of Man has authority to forgive sins. All authority in heaven and earth have been given unto me. The one greater than Solomon is here. The one greater than Moses. And so on. Many areas where Jesus over and over again essentially said, I am much greater than this. Before Abraham was, I am. Even if you ignore the I am being name of God, even if we can argue about that later, but the very fact there is, Jesus was saying that he was beyond time. Before Abraham was, he didn't say I was, he said I am. So he was essentially saying I transcend time. So all these statements put together time and time again, where Jesus was saying, I am much more than this one who has ability to forgive sins, the one who life and resurrection, who was able to give life, ultimate authority to let you into heaven,
resurrect himself.
resurrection has the I can do everything that my Father does, and so on. So you need to deal with those statements also.
That's what we were looking for. We
Okay,
didn't
so
get any of that. That's the
you're
best
saying
one.
this, but let's recall the actual beginning of the discussion was
Yeah.
about the co-equality. Are you going to give me my time?
Yeah.
Without this interrupt, I can see you.
I do.
But take
You
as
agree
long
to
as
this?
he's taken.
Yeah,
Don't
you
go
agree.
over.
No, the thing is, it's
Don't
easy
worry,
to
don't
make a
worry, go.
point, but it takes twice as long to answer the point.
Don't worry about time.
So the
Within
first
this-
point that we mentioned was about co-equality of God. This is the first one. So you said that Jesus can be part of Trinity, and you're saying that the Father is greater than I. However, the Trinitarian doctrine, which I mentioned in Orthodoxy, does not suggest that Jesus is lesser than the Father. This is a heresy, the Arian heresy, which was talked about later in the Ecumenical Council. This is the first point that was actually mentioned. It's there on camera. You didn't actually rejoin that. The first question you asked me was in regards to verses in the Bible which talk about Jesus talking about divinity. I gave the answer quite clear cut. Yes, there is, but there's a context before everything. Like for example, before Abraham is, I was or I am. Yeah. Now, in the thought or in the plan of God, we say all things were. This is what we believe in. This doesn't show clear-cut divinity of Jesus. What shows clear-cut of the divinity of the Father is Jesus' statement. For example, in 17:3, where he says that there's only one true God. In John 17 verse 3, this is what Jesus says. I mentioned a number of other things, such as James. In James, he mentioned there's only one God. I mentioned a whole lot of verses which are quite clear cut. There are some ambiguities or verses which could be read. For example, I mentioned when the people came to him and they said that you equate yourself to be God. This is what I said, because he said that he was a son of God. So I did answer that question kindly. So if you look at the answer or the rejoinder I gave in the second guess, is that Jesus said to them, did I not say ye are gods? Meaning that we have to understand already the language that was used at that time as well. So yes, Jesus did claim a sort of divinity. Does this divinity mean the same divinity as God? The answer is no. No scholar comes to this. One second. If you look at the critical scholars, they say that the divinity of Jesus in the Bible was a theological development. Now you've heard of this term. The Ecumenical Council, the Universal Councils, occurred after obviously the Emperor Constantine in the year 325 onwards. And this is where they used to debate who the personhood of Jesus was. In fact, if you look at the first four Gospels, you'll find it's very difficult to find clear-cut verses where Jesus says he is God. The one that has the highest Christology is actually the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John, which was written in Ephesus. In the same place, paganism was taking place. This is called apotheosis. I'm not sure if you know the Greek term apotheosis, where Caesar became God. Augustus was called the Son of God. So yes, there are verses, when we put them in context, it doesn't make any sense to suggest that Jesus is God. So the first point again, just a summary, is that I mentioned that this concept of a subordinate Jesus, which you believe is actually an Arian heresy. The second point was the question which you asked me, and you didn't ask the other two, is in regards to were there verses in the Bible, and I mentioned quite clear cut more than once now that there are verses, but they can be explained.
Okay, now just to go back to this, the idea that Jesus submitted himself to the Father, you calling that Arianism or a cultish idea, a heresy, is completely wrong. The biblical idea is quite clear. Like how you rightly pointed out, Jesus said the Father is greater than me. While he was on the face of the earth, Jesus made many points obviously clear. The book of Hebrews says he was made lower than the angels. So this is not Arianism, this is hardcore Christian doctrine.
Great,
Jesus,
great.
in the book of Philippians,
Try not to interject.
in the book of Philippians, a similar point is made that he deliberately emptied himself of what he could rightly hold on to. He deliberately emptied himself. So this is not Arianism, this is not heresy, this is primary hardcore Christian doctrine. While walking on the face of the earth, Jesus submitted to his Father.
Excellent.
The only question I asked you, which you think you have answered, let's go to some of the points that you raised. The only question I asked is, yes, I know he willingly submitted. By the way, I remembered a couple of other points also you raised a while ago, which you said because Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane that his Father's will be done. You said that is forced submission, not willing submission. It's not willing. But the fact is, he was saying that. In other words, he was willing to say that. It's a willing submission. Jesus could have said, I don't care what you think, I want to go my way. He didn't say that. He said, not my way, but not my will, but your will. That is what we call willing submission. Willing. I am willing to do your will, not my will. So it's all willing submission, which you see right through scriptures. Now coming back to the first question I raised wasn't that, and that's why I didn't answer the Arianism point earlier. The question wasn't that. Jesus lowering himself is hardcore. That's not the question. The question is, are there statements to indicate he was still much more than what he was claiming for himself? And there the point is, in your latest rebuttal, you said the points that I pointed out were not
ambiguity. They can be read
ambiguous,
in
not
multiple
clear cut, and so on. Quite sad, because I'd like to think, when you think about God, you think about forgiveness of sins, you think about judgment, you think about the one who lets you into heaven, and so on. These three things, Jesus says he is the one who does that. I forgive sins. I forgive sins. The Son of Man has authority to forgive sins. Point number 2. The Son of Man is the one who is going to judge. I am going to judge the sheep and the lamb, and so on. Various kinds of judgment. Jesus refers to himself as being the judge. And the third thing, he said, when he gave the parable of the sheep and the lamb, he said, I would tell them that I never knew you. In other words, he was the one who was going to tell them or determine who is going to come into heaven and who isn't going to. I'd like to think your idea of God is the one who would help you out in all these three areas, if not more. I'm pretty sure I can talk about a lot more things when it comes to Jesus' divinity. There are plenty of other things when it comes to Jesus' divinity. I also mentioned one more thing which I'd like to remind you. All authority. Jesus did not say some authority. All authority in heavens and in earth have been given to me. In other words, everything where you might think of God in terms of helping you out, in all of those areas, Jesus says he is the one who can help you. And now you're telling me it's not clear-cut, ambiguous. You need to explain to me on what basis you determine ambiguity. In which area is it not clear to you? In which particular attribute of God is it not clear to you where Jesus is saying, I can't do that? You need to tell me. So you need to define the ambiguity there. And a couple of other points you raised. You mentioned about Jacob and...
I can make it timely.
Yeah. Jacob fighting with an angel. Well, the word of God doesn't talk about any angel there. It talks about angel of God, and a Jew who would know his scriptures would know there is a very special being, entity which shows up time and time again, Malach Adonai, angel of the Lord, who they would not consider to be any angel. They know that that particular person who is referred to as angel of the Lord is a very special one. So he is not some random angel who showed up, who just happens to act as if he is God. To your point, can God be defeated? In Christian view, God of the Bible interacts with human beings in a way he would give in and give up. That is the God of the Bible. God said, I'm going to destroy all of Israel, and through you, Moses, I will raise Israel up, a new Israel. Moses said, no, God, I want you to change your plan. And God said, okay. And he changed his plan. I'm dramatizing, of course, but that's the God of the Bible. So yeah, you see various ye are gods you referred to. Now you missed a crucial part there. What did Jesus go on to say? Jesus never said ye are gods and stopped there. He went on to say, if that could be said about you, how much more the one who comes from heaven? You know, the other point I had to mention about divinity. Jesus' origin is not the earth. He came from heaven. Do we have an agreement on that? Jesus himself quite clearly said that multiple times. I have come from there. I have come from there. The one, he said, you're not going there and therefore you don't know about that place. But I have come from there. I'm going back there to prepare a place for you and so on. So divinity, quite clear, multiple places. You need to define where there is ambiguity. Give specific parameters, please.
Okay, great. So again, anyone who has the internet in front of them can check the Arian controversy. You say that this is hardcore Christianity, that the belief of Jesus being subordinate to the Father is hardcore Christianity. This is called Arianism. Anyone can find this online. You say that that's fine. But Orthodox Christianity says this is heresy. Whether you like it or not, this is the no, 1 second.
Yes, sorry.
You cannot.
Sorry, go on. Go on.
Orthodox position does not hold that Jesus is subordinate or less than the angel. It holds the position that Jesus is equal with God the Father. The second point, when he gives the evidences in regards to Jesus's this unambiguous verses in the Bible, and then he gives the verse which you say that all authority has been given unto me. The problem with that, my brother, is that if something is given to you and taken away from you, it means there's one who is giving you something and one who is taking it away from you, meaning that thing or that entity is greater than you. And this is where the ambiguity is. It indicates that Jesus is not God in any sense or divine in that sense. And you say that when the angel came onto Jacob, yeah, that is not just any angel, it's the angel of God. That's not what I contended. I contended that an angel came in representation of God. If you remember the original one, when Jesus said, "Don't I say ye are gods?" To understand what that means, you have to look at divineness throughout the whole of the scriptures. And you see when the angel came onto Jacob, it says that the angel was a representative of God, and thus he was called God. We in Islam believe that God is all powerful. We do not believe he died, he loses in a wrestling match. I think this is another heresy. I'm not sure if you also believe with that, but I think that's another heresy. So two heresies you've fallen into one discussion, and I've answered all of your questions so far because I wrote them down. So in the concept that Jesus comes from heaven, yes, the Father who art in heaven, all things come from him. This is what the Bible says. So I don't have any dispute with that.
Okay.
So no problem, answer all your questions.
Yes, 1 second.
But you also, you spoke a long time. Also, we remember at the beginning of the conversation, I gave you clear-cut verses when Jesus said there's only one true God, and the one true God has sent. John 17 verse 3. Even if you bring these ambiguous verses, you cannot explicate away the clear verses. So Jesus, and we have to follow what Jesus is saying, not what Paul, not what later Christians in the economical councils agreed upon. We have to follow what Jesus said, because he is the messenger of God. And two occasions there, this is what I mentioned, said that he makes himself equal with God. And on two occasions, he rebuked them. Two occasions, he asks the disciples, who do you say I am? Who do you say the Son of God man is? And both occasions they say Jeremiah, Elijah, the prophets. Not once do they say the God. The early Christians, the 120, headed by James, the brother of Jesus, if you read in James, he says there's only one God. The Jesseans, the Ebionites, all of the early Christians only ever believed in one God. So there are multiple Christians from the prophets, God, the prophets, Jesus, disciples, and the early church that all believe that God is one and Jesus is the messenger who is not co-equal to God.
So now I might know where you are coming from in regards to Arianism.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I'd like to point out, I think you're saying that because of a misunderstanding. The problem is this: Arianism says that Jesus is subordinate at all times, both on earth and in eternity. That is a heresy. I take that as heresy, of course. My point is, that is not Christian doctrine, I agree. But Christian doctrine is Jesus submitted to the Father here, and later there are some special relationship, points of relationship. I mean, there are some details there also which we need to discuss, but that is the difference between Arianism. Arianism essentially says Jesus does not even have the eligibility. So different nature is what it goes into, which is pretty much like the Jehovah's Witnesses today, and like Islam in a manner. By the way, Islam is very different from Jehovah's Witnesses also. To Jehovah's Witnesses, Jesus is just less than the Father, but way above how you would normally see him as a mere prophet. Now, okay, that's Arianism. I think we need to leave it at that. Now, the gifts and takes away is a bit of a humorous point you're making. The authority, all authority has been given unto me. So your point is, because someone else is giving, which he might have taken away beforehand, there is a bit of ambiguity. By the way, that's the only definition of ambiguity you gave. To me, that isn't definition of ambiguity. I asked you for a very specific parameter along which things are ambiguous. You rather gave an example of an ambiguous verse for you. The ambiguity there is in misunderstanding the dynamics. The dynamics are, I don't care whether someone is giving or taking away or doing anything. I don't care. The point is, do I have it? That is the question to be asked. What did Jesus say? I have all authority. Whether the Father gave, whether he gave it for how many ever days or whatever, did the Father give? The moment he gives, he is equal in authority, because all authority has been given unto me. Now, in other words, the giving and taking away does not matter. What matters really is, did he have it? That's what matters. Now, the angel of the Lord, again, I don't want to argue about that for much longer. I think you're missing the point again. My point isn't, it is not just a random angel, it is an angel of God. That is not my point. My point is, it is a very special Malach Adonai, which the Jews would have a very complex explanation about, and he is not a mere angel. And so who Jacob fought against was not a mere angel. That is my point. You would think he is a mere angel only if you misunderstand who Malach Adonai is, which you seem to have done, but the Jews and the Christians won't do it. The ones who know scriptures won't do it. This is not an angel, this is Malach Adonai, a special person. Now, you said comes from heaven. You said the various things. I forget the specific example you gave about coming from heaven. You said there are other examples of coming from heaven, like we are all coming from heaven or some such thing. That's not what Jesus said. What Jesus said was very precise, spatial point. He said, I know what's happening there because I come from there. It's so unlike what you and I might talk about when talking about heaven. Jesus' point is he was trying to distinguish between himself and the rest of the lot, and he was saying, I come from there. I was before Abraham. I come from that. Let's say, I mean, I don't, of course, using the term physical location wouldn't make sense because this is not a physical location. But for simplicity's sake, let's call it a location, spiritual location. Jesus' point is, I have come from there. It wasn't metaphorical, it was very spatial in that regard. Now, you also referred to Peter's question, Jesus asking the question to his disciples, who do you think the Son of Man is? And you wrapped up the response that Peter gave in a very simple way. It's very unfortunate. I don't want to diverge much, but the point is this. Jesus, when I asked the question, Peter went on to say, you are Christ, the Son of the living God. Christ, the Son of the living God. That expression, unfortunately, doesn't carry as much weight as it is supposed to carry. The Son of the living God. In a Jewish first century mindset, the Son of the living God, Jesus later on, when he was speaking to the high priest, on the day of the high priest's judgment towards him, Jesus mentioned something similar. I am the Christ, the Son of God. And he went on to say, hereinafter you would see me come with the angels of heaven, coming in clouds. The point is that expression, Son of God, is not an expression meaning, oh, I'm just one person created by God or anything of that sort, but rather it is an expression. Which means I am of the same nature as God. That expression you seem to be missing. So Peter confessed, the point isn't Jesus is found to be just a Messiah, but rather Peter found Jesus to be equal to the Father in heaven. You'd find that in another place where there was a tempest, a storm, where they were in water on a boat, and Jesus did a miracle and everything calmed down. By the time later, the disciples essentially asked the question, He can calm even the storms. Who could this be? In other words, they were grappling with a person who had authority so unlike the authority of all the prophets before him, that at his word, without even consulting with his Father, nature obeyed. Son of God is God, not anything inferior.
Son of God is God. Okay. So this is the issue we're now having. The conversation becoming extremely bloated. We have to call it. We have to give ourselves some time to say when we're going to finish this conversation. I'm going to pray soon. I'll go through everything again. Again, in terms of the Aryan definition, I'm not going to force my belief onto you. Likewise, you can't do so to me. It's best that the audience, whether it's online or in person, that they check up this definition online. Now, you say that you're talking about the subordination in the heavens.
On the earth.
On the earth.
Only when he was on the earth.
Only on the earth. However, when we read John 1:1, in the beginning was God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And the further verses say that the Word became flesh. That the God became flesh. It didn't say God became in flesh. It said God became flesh. This shows that Jesus, the flesh, wasn't something different from God, it was God. So if God is all-powerful, all-knowing there, even in his flesh, he should be all-powerful and all-God. You use the term mere prophet, the term that C.S. Lewis uses to say mere prophet, but this is a contradiction. We don't simply have mere prophets. A prophet in itself is an indication he is not normal. You cannot use this misnomer as a mere prophet. The second point, which was all authority have given to me. You said because Jesus said all authority has been given to me, equates Jesus to God. No, if you give me all of your possessions, does not mean I become you or equal to you. Here it says that it can be taken away from him also. So the giving and taking away of a person does not equate that person to the person who is giving. Is quite clear. Anyway, in terms of, again, the angel, I'm trying to run through all of these very quickly. You notice I'm not taking much time. So the angel of God, again, I never mentioned it wasn't any angel. I just said it was an angel, whether it's a good angel, a high angel, or respected angel. Do you follow the conclusion? No,
the point wasn't about respected angel. That special being is, in Jewish view, God.
You have to stick to the rules that you established before.
Yeah, but you need to
take
into account the points I've made.
I'm going through the points very quickly.
No, you're missing the points I've made.
Is it my turn to speak?
It is your turn.
Okay, so
I request you to adapt to my points.
Let's respect the rules that you established.
Yeah. The point is, I don't want you to make a point which you made 2 rounds ago. I want you to adapt to the points I've made.
I gave you the respect to speak in your turn. Give me the same respect. Okay, so I answered all of those questions. You cannot say anything. In regards to, and we're going to have to wrap this up. I can't keep going. Clear-cut verses, you said, for example, that when Jesus says the reply of who do you say I am, you said that they said you are Christ, the Son of the living God. Because he says Son of the living God, this must mean that he is God. However, that's not how it works. If you read anyone who reads the Bible, you realize that there are many sons of God. It doesn't mean that they are all divine. You have Israel, who was the firstborn of God. It doesn't mean that he was divine, but according to your logic, it means Israel is the divine. It says to David in Psalms 2:7, on this day I have begotten thee, thee are my only son. According to your logic, he is also, because he is the son of God, a God. According to you, when it says, so anyway, not to go on forever, but there are plenty of sons of God in the Bible. We have to understand it, how the Jews understood it in historical context. Anyway, so the last point, I don't know how long we're going to keep talking. You said that Peter believed that Jesus was God. However, Peter was part of the 120 Christians, the Nazarenes, who Paul refers to as the circumcised group. And it was headed by James, the brother of Jesus. Amongst them was Mary, the mother of Jesus. This group is described by Epiphanes of Salamis in his Panorion. Now he's a heresiologist. You know, heresiologist, he writes about heresies of early Christianity. So he mentioned that this group, the Nazarenes, they believed in one God and Jesus to be a man and a messenger of that one God. So I've explained all of the contentions that you've had very quickly. Anyway, I'll let the audience describe.
No, I need to.
One second.
You started off.
One second.
You started off.
The second time you interrupted me. Okay, now I'm going to let you have your. I started off. I was going to say, I'll let you,
You
have
don't
the
have to
last.
say everything. That's fine.
Listen, I said I'll let you have the last word. There's no point in going on. I believe the audience see what I have answered and the case that I've mentioned, that the God made clear in the Old Testament He is one. The prophets made clear in the Old Testament that God is one. Jesus made clear in the Bible that He is one. The companions included James and Peter and Mary believed that God is one and Jesus is not God, as well as the early groups. So I'll let you have the last say. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fine. Now the thing is, in the Old Testament, you saying one God, I agree with. Christians, that's a primary doctrine, one God. But the Old Testament does not introduce that one God, the one God in the way you might think it does. The Old Testament reveals the one God in a very complex nature, including in this person of Malach Adonai. This person of Malach Adonai is very important because this person is called Malach Adonai, but then it is also claimed that Jacob won against God himself, wrestled with God himself. So that's very important. So the Old Testament and the New Testament also agrees with one God, but not in the way you suggest. Now your idea that Peter is part of a heretic group,
according to Epiphanes of Salamis,
I'm talking about the first century biblical books, and let's stick to that.
That's what I'm talking about.
Epiphanes, everyone else comes later. They are not the source of my ultimate authority, but rather the apostles themselves. The idea that Peter considered Jesus to be subordinate is a completely wacky idea when it comes to the books of the Bible, and I must insist on that. Now, there are a couple of other points, I have forgotten some of them, but the point is, I agree there is one God. I am just suggesting to you that one God that shows up in the Bible is in a complex nature, who also showed up in the person of Jesus Christ on the face of the earth, and it is through Him all authority, whether He received it, gave it, and so on, all authority is Jesus's. He is the one who is going to let you into heaven. He is the one who is going to judge you. He is the one who forgives sins. Ignore Him, you are in jeopardy.
There's only one point I want to come back to. Did you say this is a wacky idea? And I'll leave you on this. The Bible, it says in the first Peter, whom was written by whom? You say Peter. I don't necessarily believe, but Peter 1:3, First Peter 1:3 says, "Praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus." Never say the Lord God Jesus. It made quite clear it's God who is the Father of Jesus, which once again it indicates Peter's monotheism. 2 Peter 3:7. I'll leave it very short. I won't go into too much. You say this wacky idea. This is the belief Peter had. I mentioned many other people, including the early Christians.
Can I quickly?
Yeah, sure. But I need to pray as well.
I know. Just 1 minute. The point is, this is tied to the other point which you mentioned about Jesus saying there being only one true God. What you need to grapple with. 1 minute, please. What you need to grapple with is the idea of the usage of the term.
Are you going to be? Let's call it. We finish anyway. We finish. I appreciate everything.
Lord and God. Those are the two terms we need to check up on. Jesus is consistently referred to as Lord in the New Testament. But let's
anyway, it's a nice
good to see you. God blessings. Yeah, good to see you.
You've got 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes, yeah? Remember here, Dunya.
Where's black?